The massive council chamber stretched out like a small city. Thousands of seats filled the curved walls, each section color-coded for different alien species. The Zephyrian Empire claimed an entire wing with golden seats that gleamed under the artificial lights. The hegemony controlled the central platform, their purple banners hanging from the ceiling. Even the smallest member species had dozens of representatives in the far corner. Almost hidden behind a support pillar, sat two humans at a metal table barely large enough for their datapads. Jake Morrison adjusted his uncomfortable chair and looked around the chamber. After 30 years of this, he still felt like an unwelcome guest at someone else's party. His aide, Katie Walsh, leaned over and whispered, "The collective just voted against our mining proposal again." Jake nodded without surprise. The pattern never changed. Humans would present carefully researched proposals, alien species would debate for hours, and then they would vote no. Sometimes they would steal the human ideas and present them as their own a few months later. Sometimes they would just laugh. Today felt different, though. The chamber buzzed with unusual excitement. Primarch Veltar of the hegemony stood at the central podium, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically. His translator device made his voice boom across the chamber. "We have reached a decision regarding the human expansion question," Veltar announced. "After careful consideration of all factors, the Council has voted to restrict human settlement to their current 17 systems." The chamber erupted in cheers from most species. Jake felt his stomach drop. Veltar continued. "The evidence clearly shows that humans possess aggressive tendencies unsuitable for unrestricted expansion. Their primitive nature requires the guidance of more advanced civilizations. This restriction will remain in place indefinitely." Zephyrian delegates stood up. "Furthermore, all human military vessels will be limited to defensive capabilities only. No weapons research will be permitted without Council approval." Jake's hands clenched into fists under the table. 30 years of cooperation, and this was their reward. Katie placed a calming hand on his arm, but he could see the anger in her eyes too. Another delegate from the Traders Guild added, "Human trade agreements will be reviewed annually. Any violations of Council guidelines will result in immediate suspension of trading privileges." The final insult came from a small species Jake barely recognized. "Perhaps the humans should be grateful for our generous guidance." Would still be throwing rocks at each other. Laughter filled the chamber. Even species that had benefited from human technology and knowledge joined in the mockery. Jake watched beings he had considered, friends chuckling at humanity's expense. He thought about the human colonies struggling to feed growing populations. He thought about the innovative solutions human engineers had developed, only to be dismissed as crude. He thought about the young human diplomats who had worked tirelessly to build relationships with alien species, who would never see them as equals. Jake stood up slowly. Chamber gradually quieted as delegates noticed the human ambassador. Rising from his tiny corner table, he walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "Primarch Veltar," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly without amplification. "I want to make sure I understand the Council's position correctly." Veltar's 4 eyes focused on the human. "Speak quickly, Morrison. We have important matters to discuss. You're saying that humans, despite contributing trilithium mining techniques that increase galactic production by 300%, are too primitive for expansion rights." "Correct. Despite developing the hyperdrive stabilizers that prevent your ships from exploding during long jumps, those were crude solutions. We would have found better methods. It's despite providing the agricultural systems that feed 6 Council member worlds." Veltar's voice carried irritation. "What is your point, human?" Jake looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from dozens of species. "My point is simple. We came here 30 years ago, seeking partnership. We offered our innovations, our friendship, our loyalty. We accepted junior status. We followed your rules. We compromised our principles to prove we belonged here." Paused, letting his words sink in. "You've made it clear what you think of us. You've shown us exactly how much our contributions matter to you. You've demonstrated that no matter what we do, no matter how much we help, You will always see us as primitives who need your guidance." The chamber remained silent. Jake pulled out his datapad and began reading from it. "Therefore, I am authorized by the United Earth's government and all human colonial administrations to make the following announcement." His voice grew stronger. "Humanity hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." Shocked murmurs broke out across the chamber. Veltar's translator squeaked with surprise. Jake continued reading. "We renounce all treaties, all trade agreements, and all defense pacts with Council member species. All human space is now closed to Council vessels. Our mining operations will no longer supply materials to Council worlds. Our research facilities will no longer share data with Council scientists." The murmurs became shouts. Several delegates jumped to their feet, but Jake raised his voice above the noise. "Our defensive installations will enforce these restrictions. Any Council vessel entering human space will be turned away. Any attempt to force entry will be met with appropriate response." Katie had joined him in the center of the chamber, carrying a box of documents. She began handing papers to nearby delegates. "These are formal notices of withdrawal," Jake explained. "They include lists of all terminated agreements, timelines for evacuation of Council personnel from human worlds, and new border coordinates." Veltar finally found his voice. "You cannot do this. You signed binding agreements." "We signed agreements with partners who treated us as equals," Jake replied. "Since you've made it clear we're not equals, those agreements are void. This is preposterous. You need us. Your technology is centuries behind ours." Jake smiled. "For the first time in years, is it? You've been so busy dismissing our contributions that you've never bothered to learn what we were really capable of. You saw what we chose to share. You never saw what we kept to ourselves." "You're bluffing," Veltar snarled. "You're primitives playing at being civilized. Without our guidance, you'll destroy yourselves within a generation." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But at least we'll do it as free beings, not as pets begging for scraps from your table." He and Katie walked toward the exit. The chamber erupted in angry shouts and demands, but Jake didn't look back. At the doorway, he paused and turned around. "One final time. You wanted us gone," he called out over the noise. "Congratulations, you got your wish." As the doors closed behind them, Jake heard Veltar's voice echoing through the chamber. "Good riddance to the primitives. The galaxy will be better without their barbaric influence." Katie shook her head as they walked down the corridor. "You think we're making a mistake?" Jake considered the question seriously. "Maybe, but I'd rather make our own mistakes than live under their contempt forever." They had no idea that their decision would change the galaxy forever. They only knew that humanity's long attempt to earn respect through submission was finally over. 6 months had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. Captain Lisa Park of the Zephyrian merchant vessel Cosmic Tide approached the edge of human space with her usual cargo of luxury goods. She had been running this route for 15 years, bringing silk fabrics and rare spices to the human colonies. The profits were excellent, and humans always paid on time. Her navigator, a young Zephyrian named Court, checked his instruments. "Captain, we're approaching the old trade route through the Sol system. Should I set course as usual?" Lisa nodded without looking up from her manifest. "Of course, humans may have thrown their tantrum at the Council, but business is business. They need our goods and we need their credits." As they approached the outer edge of the solar system, proximity alarms began sounding. 3 ships appeared on their sensors. Moving to intercept, Lisa frowned. Human patrol ships had never bothered merchant vessels before. "Unknown vessel. This is Commander Rick Stone of the Earth Defense Force ship Guardian. You are entering restricted space. State your business." Lisa activated her communication system. "This is Captain Park of the Cosmic Tide. We're carrying trade goods for the colonies." "We've been using this route for years." Negative, Captain Park. "Human space is now closed to all Council member species. You need to turn around and leave immediately." Lisa laughed. "Commander Stone, surely you're joking. These are open trade routes. We have contracts with your colonies. Those contracts are void. You have 10 minutes to reverse course and exit our territory." "This is ridiculous. We're not military vessels. We're peaceful traders." Rick Stone's voice remained calm but firm. Captain, I'm not going to argue with you. Human space is closed. We can leave voluntarily, or we can escort you out. Your choice? Lisa looked at her crew. This had to be a bluff. Humans were always reasonable. They needed galactic trade more than anyone else. Their economy depended on it. We're continuing on our planned route, she announced. You can't stop. Legitimate commerce. Wrong answer, Captain. The Guardian moved closer, joined by 2 other human vessels. Lisa had never seen ships quite like them. They looked sleeker than the old human designs, with strange curves and surfaces that seemed to bend light. Final warning, Captain Park. Leave now, or face the consequences. What consequences? You can't fire on unarmed merchants. The Council will have your heads. We're not part of the Council anymore, remember? And you're not unarmed. My sensors. Show defensive weapons on your ship. Lisa's blood ran cold. Human sensors had never been that accurate before. Those are just standard merchant protection systems. Every trader carries them. Armed vessel in restricted space. That makes you a threat? The Guardian fired a single beam at the cosmic tide. Lisa felt the ship shudder as her engines went dead. Every system on the bridge flickered and died, except for life support and communications. What did you do to my ship? Lisa demanded. It's disabled your engines. You're now under escort to the border. Any attempt to resist will result in your ship being destroyed. Lisa stared at her dead controls. The weapon that had disabled her ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. It had surgically shut down her engines without damaging anything else. That level of precision was supposed to be impossible. How did you do that? She whispered. Trade secret, Rick Stone replied. Now sit tight while we tow you out of our space. As the human ships guided the cosmic tide toward the border, Lisa's mind raced. The humans had always been behind the other species technologically. Their weapons were crude, their ships basic, but these vessels were advanced beyond anything the Zephyrians possessed. Captain, Court said quietly, their jamming systems are blocking our communications. We can't contact the guild. Lisa nodded grimly. When they reached the border, the human ships released their ship and restored power to the engines. Free to go, Captain Park, Rick Stone announced. But don't come back. Next time, we won't be so polite. The cosmic tide limped away from human space. Lisa immediately sent an emergency message to the Traders Guild, but she knew they wouldn't believe her report. Advanced human technology? Impossible. Similar incidents were happening across the galaxy. The merchant ship Golden Dream found its usual shortcut through human territory blocked by a wall of patrol ships. The research vessel Deep Thinker was denied access to the joint laboratory on Mars, where collective scientists had been studying human brain patterns. Most disturbing of all, the flow of materials from human space had stopped completely. Crystals that powered faster than light travel were no longer available. The rare metals that made advanced electronics possible were cut off. The specialized agricultural products that fed several worlds were gone. Admiral Elena Cruz sat in her office on the new Earth Defense Command Station, reviewing reports from across human space. Every border was secure. Every trade route was closed. Every non-human vessel had been turned away. Admiral, her aide Lieutenant Tom Baker said, "We're getting complaints from the hegemony about blocked shipping lanes." Elena smiled. "Let them complain. They wanted us gone. Now they get to see what gone really means." Some of the colony governors are worried about the economic impact. They're asking if we're sure about this policy. Tell them to look at the production reports. Our internal trade has increased by 40% since we closed the borders. Turns out we were selling our best products to aliens and keeping the scraps for ourselves. Tom nodded. What about the joint research projects? The collective is demanding access to the quantum laboratories. Those projects are terminated. All alien researchers have been evacuated. We're keeping the technology they helped develop. The Council Station. Economic Advisor Kithrin, of the Traders Guild, stood before an emergency session of the Economic Committee. The numbers on his display were frightening. Shipping costs have increased by 40%, he reported. Without access to human space, ships are forced to take longer routes through dangerous sectors. We've lost 17 vessels to pirates in the past month, Council member Dexera from the collective leaned forward. What about the trilithium? Shortage. Critical. Human mining operations supplied 70% of our trilithium crystals. Without them, we're facing shortages across the galaxy. Several worlds are already rationing energy. Surely the humans will see reason, another delegate suggested. They need our markets. Kithrin shook his head. Intelligence reports suggest they're doing fine without us. Their internal economy is booming. They've apparently been holding back their best products for themselves. Impossible. Humans are technologically inferior, are they? Captain Park's report suggests otherwise. Her ship was disabled by weapons we've never seen before. Our own intelligence indicates human technology may be decades ahead of what they shared with us. The committee fell silent. The possibility that humans had been deliberately sharing inferior technology was unthinkable. Meanwhile, in his private chambers, Primarch Veltar reviewed the latest reports. The hegemony's fastest courier ships could no longer make their scheduled runs. Critical. Supplies were delayed. Several member worlds were complaining about shortages. His advisor, General Krekstar, stood at attention. Primarch, the military is ready to force open the human trade routes. One show of strength should bring them back to the negotiating table. Veltar considered this. How many ships would we need? A single battle group should suffice. Humans have never been militarily significant, and if they resist, they won't. They know they can't stand against the hegemony's might. Veltar nodded slowly. Prepare the fleet. But be careful, General. Something about this situation doesn't feel right. As Krekstar left to prepare for military action, Veltar stared out at the stars. For the first time since the humans had left, he wondered if they had made a mistake. The galaxy was changing, and not in ways the Council had expected in human space. Dr. Sam Cooper finished his daily report on technological development. Since the withdrawal from the Council, human innovation had exploded. Without alien oversight and restrictions, human scientists were pushing the boundaries of physics itself. The new gravitational manipulation systems are ahead of schedule, he told his team. The dimensional fold drives are showing promising results. The quantum communication network is fully operational. His assistant, Dr. Nancy Wells, looked up from her datapad. Sam, are you sure we should be developing these systems so quickly? Some of this technology could be dangerous, Sam smiled. Nancy, for 30 years we held back our best ideas because the Council thought we were too primitive to handle advanced technology. Now, we're free to explore what we're really capable of. But what if they try to stop us? Let them try. They're about to discover that the humans they dismissed as primitives have been playing a very long game. Across the galaxy, the first cracks were appearing in the Council's confidence. The humans had been gone for only 6 months, but the impact was already severe. Trade routes were disrupted, resources were scarce, and technology was failing without human-supplied components. Council had wanted the humans gone. Now they were beginning to understand what that really meant. 1 year had passed since humanity closed its borders. The galactic economy was falling apart piece by piece. Trade ships that once moved freely between star systems now took weeks to complete journeys that had taken days. Longer routes, knowing that help was far away, Dr. Sam Cooper stood in his laboratory on Europa, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. As humanity's former chief technology liaison to the Council, he knew exactly what the alien species were facing. He had tried to warn them years ago that their systems were more dependent on human technology than they realized. They had laughed at him then. Sir, his assistant Dr. Nancy Wells said, we're getting reports from the border stations. Several alien delegations are requesting meetings. Sam nodded without surprise. What's the current supply situation in Council space, Nancy? Checked her datapad. Trilithium crystal reserves are down to 3% of normal levels. Medical supplies are running short on 14 worlds. Food production systems are failing on 6 planets. Their manufacturing centers, shutting down one by one. Turns out they built their entire industrial base around components we supplied. Without replacement parts, their factories can't operate. Sam had seen this coming 30 years ago. The alien species had eagerly adopted human-designed stabilizers for their hyperdrives, human-engineered processors for their computers, and human-developed techniques for their agriculture. They had called these contributions crude and primitive, but they had used them everywhere. The breaking point came on Zephyr Prime, the capital world of the Zephyrian Empire. The planet's medical manufacturing centers had been designed around rare metals that only human mining operations could efficiently extract. When the supply stopped, the factories began closing down. Dr. Yexera, chief medical officer for Zephyr Prime, watched her supplies dwindle day by day. The cancer treatment drugs that kept millions alive were almost gone. The surgical tools that her doctors needed were breaking without replacement parts. Children were dying from diseases that had been easily treatable just months before. "Long do we have?" she asked her supply coordinator. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we ration everything. And the manufacturing restart? It's impossible without human-supplied materials. We've tried substitutes, but nothing works. The humans somehow figured out extraction techniques that we never developed. On the council station, Primarch Veltar faced the worst crisis of his career. Representatives from dozens of worlds were demanding action. The collective's hive-mind coordination systems were failing as human-designed. Quantum processors reached the end of their operational life. The hegemony's military was discovering that their weapon systems needed human-supplied power cores that were no longer available. How did this happen? Veltar demanded during an emergency council session. We're the advanced civilizations. Humans are primitives. Trade Representative Nexera stood to address the chamber. Primarch, I've reviewed our technology assessments from the past 30 years. It appears we made several critical errors. Explain. We assumed human contributions were crude because they used different approaches than ours. We didn't realize they were often more efficient. Their mining techniques extracted 90% more material than our methods. Their computer processors were smaller but more powerful than anything we had developed. You're saying humans were more advanced than us? In some areas, yes. But they shared their innovations freely, so we never bothered to understand how they worked. We just used them. Council member Zixstar from the Traders Guild added his own disturbing report. Our economists have run the numbers. Human trade represented only 12% of total galactic commerce, but it was concentrated in critical areas. They supplied the components that everything else depended on. Veltar felt a cold fear growing in his chest. Can we replace their contributions? Quickly. Some of their techniques took them decades to develop. We'd need years to recreate their work, assuming we could figure out how they did it. What about forcing them back to the negotiating table? General Krexstar stood up. The military option is ready, Primarch? One battle group should convince them to cooperate. Veltar looked around the chamber at the desperate faces of his fellow council members. Several species were facing internal collapse. Others were dealing with massive civil unrest as living conditions deteriorated. Something had to be done. Authorize the operation, he decided. But make it clear we're not conquering. We're negotiating from a position of strength. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Amy Foster reviewed intelligence reports in her office. The woman who had replaced the previous administration was known for her direct approach to problems. She had been elected on a platform of human independence and strength. They're planning military action, General Marcus Webb reported. A hegemony battle group is moving toward our border. How many ships? 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and support vessels. Standard intimidation force. Amy smiled grimly. They still think we're the same humans who begged for counsel. Membership 30 years ago. Admiral Cruz's fleet is ready to respond. The new ships have been tested and are fully operational. What about our defensive systems? Online and waiting. The gravitational manipulation networks are active around all major systems. If they want to see what humans can really do, we'll show them. The first probe came 3 days later. A single hegemony cruiser, the Dominator, entered the outer edge of the Sol system. Captain Vexstar expected to find the primitive orbital platforms and outdated Coat missile systems that human military had used during the Council years. Instead, his sensors detected nothing. The system appeared completely undefended. "This is easy," his tactical officer reported. "Where are their defenses?" "Probably hiding behind their moon," Vexstar laughed. Humans never were clever with military strategy. As the Dominator moved deeper into the system, proximity alarms suddenly screamed. Ships appeared from nowhere, surrounding the hegemony vessel. But these weren't the clunky human ships Vexstar remembered. These vessels were elegant, deadly, and completely silent. Admiral Elena Cruz's voice came over the communication system. "Hegemony vessel, you are in violation of our territorial boundaries. Leave immediately. This is Captain Vexstar of the Hegemony Navy. We demand to speak with your government. Your demands are irrelevant. You have 60 seconds to leave our space. We're not afraid of primitive human weapons." Then you're about to learn something new. What happened next defied everything Vexstar knew about space combat. The human ships didn't fire energy weapons or launch missiles. Instead, the space around the Dominator began to twist and fold. The cruiser's hull started to buckle as gravitational forces pulled it in different directions at once. "What's happening?" Vexstar screamed as his ship began to tear apart. "You wanted to see advanced technology?" Elena Cruz replied calmly. "We're showing you what humans developed while you weren't looking." The Dominator's escape pods launched. Just before the ship collapsed into a singularity that winked out of existence, the human ships collected the survivors and escorted them to the border without saying another word. When the survivors reached the main hegemony fleet, their report sent shockwaves through the command structure. Humans had weapons that could manipulate gravity itself. It could make ships disappear from reality. The technology was decades beyond anything the Council possessed. General Krexstar stared at the tactical reports in disbelief. "This is impossible. Humans don't have this kind of technology." "Apparently they do," his intelligence officer replied. "The question is, how long have they had it?" Back on Earth, Dr. Cooper met with the President's Science Council. "They're starting to understand that we weren't sharing our best technology with the Council. How much did we hold back?" President Foster asked. "About 60% of our actual capabilities. We always kept our most advanced research classified. The Council saw what we wanted them to see, and now we're free to use everything we've developed. The gravitational manipulation systems are just the beginning. We have dimensional folding technology, quantum displacement drives, and matter conversion systems that make their technology look like stone tools." Foster nodded. "What's our status for full independence? We're already there. We don't need anything from Council space. Our closed-loop economy is more efficient than the Galactic system ever was. We're actually better off without them." Meanwhile, Trade Representative Nexara had been authorized to make direct contact with humanity. She arrived at the border station expecting to negotiate from a position of mutual need. She was wrong. Ambassador Paul Grant, Jake Morrison's replacement, met her in a sterile conference room. His expression was polite but cold. "We're prepared to discuss limited trade agreements," Nexara began hopefully. "We're not interested in trade," Grant replied simply.
"Surely you need some galactic goods."
"Some resources, some technology exchange?" "What we needed was respect. What we needed was to be treated as equals. You made it clear that wasn't going to happen." Nexara's desperation was obvious. "The situation has changed. We understand now that we underestimated human capabilities. We're prepared to offer full Council membership with senior status." 18 months after humanity closed its borders, the galactic situation had become desperate. 3 Council member species were facing complete governmental collapse. The Collective's hive mind network was breaking down as critical processors failed one by one. Billions of connected minds were being cut off from their central coordination, creating chaos across dozens of worlds. General Marcus Webb sat in his command center on Luna Base, reviewing intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of galactic affairs. As head of the Human Defense Fleet, he needed to know what was happening beyond their borders. What he was learning worried him. "Sir," his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Dan Foster, said, "we're getting reports of military buildup in 3 sectors. The hegemony is gathering a massive fleet." Marcus looked at the tactical displays. "How massive?" "Over 200 ships. Battlecruisers, destroyers, carrier groups. It's the largest military force assembled in 50 years. Target, unknown, but they're positioning near our borders. Marcus had expected this. Desperate people did desperate things. The council members were watching their civilizations crumble, while humanity thrived in isolation. Military force would seem like their only option. What's our defensive status? All border systems are protected by gravitational manipulation networks. The new dimensional displacement fields are operational. Admiral Cruz has the fleet ready. For deployment? Marcus nodded, but something else in the reports caught his attention. What's this about internal conflicts? Don checked his notes. The hegemony and the collective are blaming each other for the crisis. Several smaller species have declared independence from the council. The Traders Guild has split into competing factions. They're falling apart, yes sir, without the stabilizing influence of human trade and technology. Old rivalries are resurging. Some intelligence suggests they might start fighting each other soon. This was worse than Marcus had expected. He had hoped the alien species would learn from their mistakes and find new solutions. Instead, they were collapsing into chaos and looking for someone to blame. The source of his most reliable intelligence was surprising. Zarthok, former chief of council security, had grown disgusted with the council's increasingly desperate measures. The four-armed alien had been secretly feeding information to humanity for months. They met in a neutral location, an abandoned mining station in unclaimed space. Zarthok's normally confident demeanor was replaced by obvious stress. The situation is worse than your reports indicate, he told Marcus. The council is planning something drastic. Define drastic. They're convinced that humans are bluffing about their military capabilities.
Oh.
Primarch Veltar believes your advanced technology is just propaganda designed to scare them.
Oh.
Marcus almost laughed. After what happened to the Dominator, they think it was a trick, some kind of illusion or staged demonstration. They refuse to believe humans could develop technology that advanced. What are they planning? Zarthok's four eyes showed genuine fear. Full military invasion. They want to take human space by force and capture your technology. They think once they control your systems, they can reverse engineer everything they need. That's suicide. Know that, you know that. They're not thinking clearly anymore. Entire worlds are dying. The collective is fragmenting. The hegemony's military is demanding action. Veltar is under pressure from every direction. Marcus felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. When soon, the fleet will be ready within days. After Zarthok left, Marcus immediately contacted President Amy Foster. The conversation was brief and decisive. They want to see what humans are capable of when we're not playing by council rules, Amy said after hearing the intelligence report. Fine, let's show them. Ma'am, are you authorizing? Full defensive measures. I'm authorizing whatever Admiral Cruz thinks is necessary to protect human space. No restrictions. Marcus understood the implications. For 30 years, humanity had limited their military technology to avoid frightening the council. They had used conventional weapons, basic shields, and standard propulsion systems. The council had never seen what humans could really build when they stopped holding back. Admiral Alina Cruz received her orders with grim satisfaction. She had been preparing for this moment since the withdrawal began. Her new fleet represented technologies that were decades beyond anything the council possessed. All ships report ready status, her tactical officer reported. The dimensional fold drives are operational. Gravitational manipulation systems are at full power. Quantum displacement fields are active. Alina looked at the tactical display showing the approaching council fleet. 200 ships against humanity's 37. In conventional warfare, those odds would be hopeless. But this wouldn't be conventional warfare. Admiral, her communications officer, announced, "We're receiving a transmission from the lead council ship. Put it through, Primarch." Veltar's voice filled the bridge. "Human Admiral, this is your final warning. We are prepared to use overwhelming force if necessary." Lena activated her reply. "Channel Primarch Veltar. This is Admiral Cruz. You are in violation of human territorial space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." We know your technology is primitive, Admiral. Your demonstration with the Dominator may have fooled others, but we've analyzed the data. Some kind of tractor beam technology, nothing more. You're welcome to test that theory. We have 200 ships. Human. You have barely 30. Surrender now, and we'll be merciful. Alina smiled coldly. Primarch, you're about to learn the difference between what we showed you during the Council years and what we're really capable of. The battle began unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The human ships didn't engage in traditional combat. Instead, they simply vanished from normal space and reappeared inside the Council formation. The first wave of Council ships found themselves surrounded by vessels that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. Human ships moved through solid matter, appeared in multiple locations simultaneously, and fired weapons that bypassed shields entirely. Captain Dexara of the hegemony cruiser Vengeance watched in horror as human ships phased through his hull, without causing damage, only to reappear behind his formation and disable his entire squadron with weapons that attacked matter at the molecular level. How is this possible? He screamed at his tactical officer. Unknown, sir. Their ships seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our weapons can't lock onto them. The human ships weren't just using advanced technology. They were using science that the Council didn't even understand. Dimensional folding allowed them to move through solid matter. Quantum displacement let them exist in several places at once. Gravitational manipulation turned enemy ships into compressed matter that winked out of existence. Within 20 minutes, half the Council fleet was disabled or destroyed. The survivors tried to retreat, but found their escape routes blocked by human ships that had somehow surrounded the entire battle area. Admiral Cruz's voice echoed across all Council communication channels. Attention, Council fleet. You are defeated. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Primarch Veltar, aboard his flagship, stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His massive fleet was being torn apart by weapons he couldn't understand. Ships were vanishing into dimensional folds. Others were being compressed into singularities. A few were simply ceasing to exist as their molecular bonds were disrupted. How long have they had this technology? Whispered his science officer. Trembling with fear, replied, based on the sophistication, decades at least, maybe longer. Had this during the Council years? They must have. This level of development doesn't happen overnight. The horrible truth hit Veltar like a physical blow. Humanity had possessed technology that could have dominated the galaxy for decades. They had chosen to appear primitive and weak, while the Council treated them with contempt. They had deliberately hidden their true capabilities. Primarch, his communications officer, reported, Admiral Cruz is demanding your personal surrender. Looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders he couldn't give. His fleet was finished. His species' military dominance was a joke compared to human capabilities. Open a channel, he ordered. Alina Cruz appeared on his main screen, her expression calm and professional. Behind her, displays showed the tactical situation. The Council fleet was completely surrounded and helpless. Primarch, she said simply. I don't understand, Veltar began. You had this power all along? Why didn't you use it? Why did you let us treat you as inferiors? Elena's expression didn't change. Because we hoped you would eventually treat us as equals. We were wrong. You could have ruled the galaxy. You didn't want to rule the galaxy. We wanted to be part of it. You made that impossible. What happens now? Now you leave our space and never return. Consider this your final lesson in human capabilities. The surviving Council ships were allowed to retreat, but not before human vessels disabled their weapons and downloaded their military databases. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed them completely, but chose mercy instead. 2 years had passed since humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council. The defeat of the Council's invasion fleet had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Word spread quickly about human ships that could phase through solid matter and weapons that erased targets from existence. The Council's image of technological superiority was shattered forever. President Amy Foster stood before the Global Assembly on Earth. addressing representatives from every human colony and station. The woman who had led humanity's complete break from galactic politics was now overseeing their transformation into something entirely new. For 30 years, we bent over backward to prove we belonged at their table, she said to the packed chamber. We compromised our principles, limited our growth, and accepted their condescension because we thought cooperation was worth the price. We were wrong. The audience listened in complete silence. Every person in the room had lived through the council years, watching humanity beg for scraps of respect from species that saw them as primitive children. We discovered something important when we left their table. We don't need their approval. We don't need their markets. We don't need their technology. What we needed was the freedom to become what we were always capable of being. She gestured to displays showing human space. The 17 systems that had once seemed like a prison were now the heart of a growing civilization that stretched across 43 star systems. Human colonies were thriving beyond anything they had achieved under council restrictions. Our population has grown by 30% since the withdrawal. Our technology has advanced decades beyond council capabilities. Our economy is stronger than it ever was when we depended on galactic trade. Most importantly, our children are growing up free. Dr. Sam Cooper, now director of the Human Scientific Advancement Initiative, watched the speech from his laboratory on Europa. Around him, his team worked on projects that would have been forbidden under council oversight. Faster-than-light communication, systems, matter, transportation technology, experimental dimensional engineering that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Dr. Cooper, his assistant Nancy Wells, said, "The dimensional fold drive tests are showing remarkable results. We can now transport objects instantly across distances of up to 50 light-years." Sam nodded without surprise. What about the communication breakthrough? Complete success? Can send messages instantaneously across the entire galaxy? Quantum entanglement network is fully operational. These were technologies that the Council had claimed were impossible. Human scientists had been working on them in secret for decades, but Council oversight had prevented full development. Freed from alien restrictions, human innovation was exploding at an unprecedented rate. Any word from our deep space exploration teams? The Dimensional Scouts have mapped 17 new galaxies beyond the local group. Some of them show signs of civilizations that make the Council look primitive. Sam smiled. Humanity was no longer limited to thinking small. They were exploring possibilities that the Council species couldn't even imagine. Meanwhile, galactic community was falling apart. Without the stabilizing influence of human technology and trade, old conflicts that had been suppressed for generations began to resurface. The collective and the hegemony were on the brink of open warfare. Several smaller species had declared independence from the Council. The Traders Guild had completely fragmented into competing factions. On the Council station, what remained of the leadership met in emergency session. Primarch Veltar looked older and more desperate than ever before. The confident leader, who had dismissed humanity as primitives, was now facing the collapse of everything he had built. The situation is critical, reported Council member Zixstar. The hegemony's military is demanding action against the collective. The collective is threatening to withdraw from all joint operations. Our member species are fighting each other. Instead of working together, what about the human situation? Beltar asked. No change. They continue to refuse all contact. Our intelligence suggests they're expanding rapidly into unclaimed space. They seem to have unlimited resources and technology we can't understand. The most disturbing reports came from the border regions. Human ships had been observed moving at impossible speeds, constructing massive installations in empty space, and conducting experiments that produced energy readings beyond anything the Council had ever detected. Trade Representative Nexera, who had failed in her previous attempt to negotiate with humanity, presented her latest analysis. Our economic models show that human prosperity has actually increased since the withdrawal. They're not suffering at all from the loss of galactic trade. How is that possible? Veltar demanded. They've created a completely closed-loop economy. Everything they need, they produce themselves. Their technology has advanced to the point where they can convert basic matter into any resource they require, The Council was learning a harsh lesson about dependence. They had assumed that humans needed galactic civilization more than galactic civilization needed humans. The opposite was proving to be true. Ambassador Paul Grant, now representing the newly formed Human Transcendence Initiative, which received a steady stream of communications from desperate alien governments. Some offered territorial concessions, promised senior positions in reformed council structures. A few even suggested complete restructuring of galactic government with humanity as the dominant power. His response never varied. From his office on the border station, he sent the same message to every delegation. Humanity is not interested in rejoining galactic politics. We have moved beyond the need for your approval or cooperation. The most significant change came when a group of younger species, ones that had not been part of the original council structure, approached humanity with a different proposal. Led by Ambassador Kelrim of the Nexus Confederation, they represented civilizations that had grown tired of council restrictions and failures. "We're not asking you to rejoin the old system," Kelrim explained during a carefully arranged meeting. "We're proposing something completely new. Partnership between truly equal species, with humanity as a founding member rather than a supplicant." Grant listened carefully. These species had not participated in the discrimination against humanity. Some had even opposed council policies during the human membership years. What would this partnership involve? Grant asked. Free exchange of technology and ideas? Mutual defense agreements? Expansion into unclaimed space? Most importantly, no species would be considered inferior to any other. And the old council members? They would not be invited back. This would be a fresh start, without the baggage of past mistakes. For the first time since the withdrawal, Grant seemed genuinely interested. "I'll present your proposal to our leadership. But understand, humanity will not accept anything less than full equality. We wouldn't expect anything else back on Earth." President Foster reviewed the proposal with her cabinet. The possibility of new alliances with species that had not participated in humanity's humiliation was intriguing. "What's the strategic value?" asked General Webb. Limited Admiral Cruz replied. "I don't need their technology or resources. But political cooperation could be useful for future expansion." "What about the risk of repeating past mistakes?" Dr. Cooper asked. Foster considered this carefully. "The difference is that we're negotiating from a position of strength now. We're not begging to join their club. They're asking to join ours." The decision was made to engage in preliminary discussions, but with strict conditions. Any new alliance would be structured around human capabilities and human terms. There would be no compromises made for the sake of alien comfort. Meanwhile, as the old council continued its spiral toward collapse, the hegemony and collective had begun limited military actions against each other. The Traitors Guild factions were engaging in economic warfare. Several worlds were facing complete governmental breakdown. Primarch Veltar, watching his life's work crumble around him, finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. By forcing humanity to leave, he had removed the one stabilizing force that had been holding galactic civilization together. "How did we get it so wrong?" he asked his remaining advisors. "We saw what we wanted to see," replied the science counselor. "We assumed that because humans use different approaches, they must be primitive. We never considered that their methods might actually be superior. And now, they've moved beyond us entirely. They're not just technologically advanced. They've transcended the limitations that still constrain our thinking." The irony was painful. The Council had spent decades trying to restrict human growth because they feared human potential. By forcing humanity to develop independently, they had created exactly what they had been trying to prevent: a civilization that no longer needed the galaxy's approval and was powerful enough to reshape reality according to their own vision. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force, they had simply outgrown it. The species that had once begged for acceptance at the galactic table had built their own table, and it was bigger than anything the Council had ever imagined. 3 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. What had once been a stable civilization held together by Council authority was now a collection of warring factions and collapsing governments. Dr. Sam Cooper stood in his new laboratory, a structure that existed partially outside normal space-time. Through dimensional engineering, human scientists had learned to build installations that occupied multiple dimensions simultaneously. The laboratory was bigger inside than outside, defying the basic laws of physics that still constrained other species. The dimensional mapping project is complete, his assistant Nancy Wells reported. We've successfully charted 17 parallel dimensions. Some of them contain resources that don't exist in our reality. Sam nodded, reviewing the data.
A what?
About the matter conversion systems? Fully operational. We can now transform any basic element into any other element we need. Resource scarcity is officially extinct for human civilization. This was the breakthrough that had changed everything. While the Council species still fought over limited resources, humanity had learned to create whatever they needed from the basic building blocks of reality itself. They were no longer bound by the economic limitations that constrained everyone else. Sir Nancy continued, "We're detecting massive energy readings from the hegemony sector. It looks like they're finally at war with the collective." Sam wasn't surprised. Without human technology to maintain their systems and human trade to support their economies, the old council members had been turning on each other for months. The hegemony blamed the collective for the crisis. The collective blamed the hegemony. Both were wrong, but neither would admit it. Admiral Alina Cruz received the same intelligence reports aboard her flagship, a vessel that existed in folded space and could appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Her fleet had grown beyond anything the old council could have imagined. Ships that phased through dimensions, weapons that erased targets from existence, and defensive systems that made human space completely impregnable. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the hegemony has launched a full assault on collective territory. 12 star systems are under attack. Casualties unknown, but the energy readings suggest they're using planet-killer weapons. This isn't a limited conflict. Alina had expected this.
Out.
Desperate civilizations did desperate things. The hegemony and collective had been building toward war since the human withdrawal began. Now their mutual hatred had finally overcome their common sense. What's our response? Standing orders from President Foster. Observe but do not intervene. The decision to let the old council members destroy each other had been difficult, but necessary. Humanity could have stopped the war easily, but doing so would only delay the inevitable. The council species needed to learn the full consequences of their choices. Meanwhile, on what remained of the council station, Primarch Veltar faced the end of his civilization. The station itself was falling apart as critical systems failed without human-supplied components. The member species had withdrawn from the council. The other half were either at war or on the brink of internal collapse. Primarch his aide reported, the hegemony has issued an ultimatum. They demand that we formally dissolve the council and transfer all authority to them. Veltar laughed bitterly. And if we refuse, they'll destroy the station. What about the collective's response? They've made the same demand. Both sides want to inherit what's left of council authority. Veltar looked around the empty council chamber where thousands of delegates had once gathered. Now only a few dozen remained, representing species too weak to matter or too stubborn to admit defeat. "Open a priority channel to Earth," he ordered. His aide looked confused. "Humans have refused all contact for 3 years. Try anyway." The communication request was automatically rejected, as every previous attempt had been. But this time, something different happened. A human voice came through the static. "This is Ambassador Paul Grant. You have 30 seconds. Veltar felt a desperate hope. "Ambassador Grant, this is Primarch Veltar. I'm requesting an emergency meeting." Denied. "Please, you have to listen. The galaxy is tearing itself apart. Billions are dying. You're the only ones with the power to stop this." Grant's voice remained cold. "You mean the civilizations that voted to restrict our growth, that stole our technology and called us primitives, that laughed when we offered partnership, made mistakes, terrible mistakes? But surely you don't want to see entire species wiped out. What I want is irrelevant. You created this situation. You deal with the consequences. We'll give you anything. Complete control of the council. Unlimited expansion rights. Full authority over galactic policy. There was a long pause before Grant responded. Primarch, 3 years ago, those offers might have meant something. Now they're worthless. Don't need your permission to expand. Don't want your authority. We've moved beyond the limitations that still constrain your thinking. Then what do you want? Nothing you can give us. You have everything we need. The communication ended. Veltar stared at the empty screen, finally understanding that humanity was no longer part of the galaxy's political structure. They had transcended it entirely. President Amy Foster received Grant's report in her office on Earth. Outside her window, she could see the construction of humanity's latest project, a space elevator that extended beyond the planet's atmosphere and into folded dimensions, allowing instant transportation to any human colony. The formal dissolution is proceeding as expected, Grant reported. The Council will officially cease to exist within days. What about the war, expanding rapidly? The Hegemony and Collective are both using weapons that will render entire star systems uninhabitable. Neither side seems capable of stopping. Foster nodded sadly. Any species requesting asylum? Several of the younger civilizations. The ones that weren't part of the original discrimination against us. Grant them safe passage to neutral space. But make it clear we're not accepting refugees from hegemony or collective territory. The distinction was important. Humanity was willing to help species that had not participated in their humiliation, but they had no obligation to save those who had created the current crisis. Ambassador Kelrim of the Nexus Confederation was among those seeking human protection. His species had opposed council policies during the human membership years and had been punished for it. Now, they faced extinction as the galaxy collapsed around them. Ambassador Grant, he said during their meeting, our preliminary partnership. Discussions showed promise. Are you still willing to consider formal alliance? Grant studied the alien carefully. Under what terms? Complete equality? Mutual defense agreements? Shared exploration of uncharted space? Most importantly, humanity would be the senior partner in any joint ventures. And governance? Humanity would have final authority on all major decisions. We've seen what happens. When the wrong species are allowed to lead, for the first time in 3 years, Grant smiled. I'll present your proposal to President Foster. The irony was perfect. The species that had been denied equal status in the old council were now being offered senior partnership in a new alliance. The galaxy's power structure had completely reversed. On Earth, the Global Assembly voted unanimously to accept the Nexus Confederation proposal. But their conditions were strict. Any member species that had participated in human discrimination would be permanently excluded. The new alliance would be built around human capabilities and human values. Dr. Cooper's dimensional. Research had revealed something that changed everything. Beyond the local galaxy cluster, vast civilizations existed that made the old council look like children playing with toys. Humanity's transcendent technology was opening doors to possibilities that the council species couldn't even imagine. We're not just the most advanced civilization in this galaxy, Cooper reported to the president. We're potentially the most advanced civilization in this entire dimensional cluster. The technologies we've developed could reshape reality on a universal scale. Foster understood the implications. Humanity wasn't just leaving the galactic table. They were building a new table so large that the old galaxy was just one small corner of it. Ambassador Grant's final report to the old council was broadcast across all remaining communication networks. His message was simple and devastating. The Galactic Council is officially dissolved. All treaties and agreements are void. Human space remains closed to former council members permanently. To the species that treated us as equals during our membership years, we extend offers of partnership in a new alliance. To those that didn't, we wish you luck with the problems you created. As the transmission ended, the last lights went out on the council station. The civilization that had ruled the galaxy for centuries was extinct, destroyed not by external conquest, but by its own arrogance and stupidity in human space. Construction continued on projects that would have been considered impossible just years before. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions, ships that could travel between galaxies instantly, and technologies that turned science, fiction into reality. The species that had once begged for acceptance at the galactic table had built their own universe. And in that universe, they were no longer seeking anyone's approval.